Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this conversation titled Museum at the Forefront of the Community, as part of the 34th edition of Abu Dhabi International Book Fair. My name is Sha'ar, and I am part of the talent development team at DCT. I have been fortunate to be part of the opening team of Louvre Abu Dhabi. This experience gave me first-hand insight into the incredible work that goes into making a museum not only a space for housing amazing collections, but a dynamic one that is open for connection, learning, and belonging. Today, we're joined by two inspiring leaders from two of UAE's, Abu Dhabi, iconic museums and cultural institutions. Dr. Peter McGee, Director of Zayed National Museum project, which is yet to open, inshallah, soon. We're very excited for that. And Manuel Rabate, Director of Louvre Abu Dhabi. The first museum is opened in Saadiyat Cultural District. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage. Welcome. This year, as the Year of Community, invites us all to think about how institutions like these two can play even a greater role in enriching lives, bringing people together, and ensuring that culture is not just preserved, but lived and shared. I look forward to exploring with our panelists today how Louvre Abu Dhabi and Zayed National Museum are actively engaging the public, fostering inclusivity, and creating participatory experiences that empower communities. In 2022, ICOM General Conference in Prague took place, and where member states redefined the term of museum. The first definition took place in 1970, and 50 years later, they're coming to redefine the words with accessibility, diversity, community, inclusivity. What triggered that redefinition of the museum? The question is open for both of you.
First of all, thank you very much, Mariam. It's a pleasure to we never lost track, but to see you again in this setting, thanks to the International Book Fair of Abu Dhabi to having us and to having me. You're pointing a very important discussion, semantic discussion, which actually is rooted in even a bigger discussion, because this new definition was the starting point in Kyoto, so 3 years before. So the International Council of Museums is an international association which is gathering dozens of thousands of specialists of museum, and the agenda, the motif of the museum is one of the key elements. And so I think there was a need to renew the, let's say, maybe too descriptive, too static definition, which was the first one when the organization was created, and to put back the agenda, and what are the museum made for? What do they do for the society? And in Kyoto, and I was there, I remember it was a huge fight because the organization almost split up on how to frame the agenda. Mm-hmm. So Prague was a moment of coming together, actually, where the full community came back with, I would say, still renewed, but let's say less divisive definition. So it's actually very important that the inclusivity was kept in this simplification after a big dispute on what the museum are for. And I think for us in Abu Dhabi, when the Saadiyat Cultural District is opening, and very soon Peter promised he would announce at the end of the talk the opening date of Zayed National Museum. So you need to stay with us until the end. But since we are in this incredible dynamism and ambitious program, what is the impact of the museum on the society is extremely important. The year of community, in the year of where inclusivity becomes a matter, yes, the museum is not only a place where you protect artwork, where you present them to the public. It is a social place by nature, and this is what is said in this definition. It's not necessarily the agenda; it is the obviousness of the participation to the social fabric of the museum institution.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo much of what Manuel has said, and I think I wasn't in Kyoto, but I was in Prague, and this issue of redefining museums. First of all, any term for an institution, any noun which operates, whether or not it's a museum or another word, it has to constantly undergo a series of analyses and redefinitions. The greatest challenge that we face in the cultural field is when definitions and ideas become staid, they become static, and not malleable or not responsive. And I think that is when that happens is when conversation stops, and when discussion stops, and when dynamism stops. Manuel just referred to the dynamism at Sarriat Cultural District, the museums there. The dynamic nature of those institutions is only driven by discourse and discussion. So in reference to the museums themselves, or the term museum, what defines it, what we saw in Prague was an attempt to, in a sense, I think, position museums as something which we know already, something which primarily is not about objects, but which is about people. And when you make things about people, by definition, it has to be inclusive. You can't have half the people. You can't have 3/4 of the people. So when you start to think about the institution in those ways, formal definitions of change are absolutely necessary. And I was in the session, as was Manuel, in Prague, when it was adopted, and there was a lot of emotion in the room, and that's okay, I guess. But what we saw was process and action. And because of that, I have absolutely no doubt that in a couple of years, the definition will be redefined again. And this is only right. This is part of it makes sense in a book fair to talk about the never-ending story. And that is the never-ending story of definitions. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So to build on what you said, if I say, Manuel, we see a lot of community events at Louvre Abu Dhabi. This year, students' programs, film screening, you had even a coffee fest. Please share with us your and your team's thought process to interpret the year of community at Louvre Abu Dhabi.
I think that for Louvre Abu Dhabi, like for DCT, and I would say for the overall system, this year of community doesn't come as a rupture. It's not now that we are working with the community. The Department of Community Development, which is a big partner of us and a very active entity, institutional at Abu Dhabi level and so on, they existed before. They had a very important role. So this year is not, for me, it's an amplification. So this is exactly what we do at Louvre Abu Dhabi. We, all our teams, from the programming, people working in the education, but all the line, curatorial to development, everyone is trying to see how we can amplify and what we are already doing in terms of inclusivity, in terms of reaching out to everyone. Nobody should be left behind. And I think that's the spirit.
100%.
You mentioned some of the key program. We have a very, very, very efficient one called a takeover, which can be school takeover or university takeover. And this is really, if you go back to the ICOM definition, like many voices, who can speak in a museum, who has the authority. So in the school and university takeover, we invite the student, we invite the school kids by groups, alone, to have a discourse on the collection, on the museum, on where they are. And it's beautiful. Huh? We do it on Mondays when the museum is closed, and they really take over physically and also intellectually. And this is one way to create the inclusivity and the intellectual ownership. We also have many ways of working with people who cannot come to the museum, which we're also amplifying. And when I say people who cannot come, it can be people who think the museum is not for them. And we have a very beautiful program with elder Emirati who are invited to tell stories inside the galleries, which is a way of saying, "Tfaddal, this is your place. You can. You don't need to be a specialist or curator on the object. You can tell the story about this object, and your voice will be as strong." It's also on the maybe we'll come back to that, but the accessibility, when physical accessibility, this a completely different way of it's not because you don't think it's for you, it's because they are challenges in movement, and so people of determination, you need to make sure that you are welcoming and inclusive. We had beautiful full day on the autism month. That was less than 10 days ago, and that was a beautiful moment of allowing children with autism to be in the space in peace and so on. So we have a special place inside the museum, which is a quiet room, which can use. So it's
amazing.
It's people, and it is a structure that can welcome that. So we will do more to come.
Thank you, Manuel. And maybe we'll talk more about this accessibility in the upcoming questions. So Dr. Peter, Zayed National Museum is not yet open, but tell us, how does one reach out to the community prior to opening its doors? Is it by starting with this amazing Magan boat that I just saw?
Well, thank you for mentioning the Magan boat. So that's something, and if you all haven't had an opportunity to visit the Zayed National Museum booth here, you can see an exploration of a Bronze Age boat that we constructed. It's just a Bronze Age boat we built one day. No, it took 5 years. It's incredible. We sailed it in the Arabian Gulf. That was a community engagement exercise. But I think in reference to the issue of community, Zayed National Museum carries the mission, the vision, and the values of Sheikh Zayed. It tells his story. It tells about his values and how they are interwoven into the history and culture of the UAE. Without or with the year of community, community is the central DNA of the museum. It has been last year, it will be even more this year, and it'll be always more. It is a museum which at its heart tells the story of the people of this country. It tells about Sheikh Zayed and the unification of this country in 1971. And because it does that, by definition, it is of and for the community. But it's worth thinking about the term community even more broadly than that. We can think about the community within the UAE. We can think about, if we think about the way in which community is used in other contexts, for example, not within the UAE, but maybe in other countries, sometimes there's a homogeneity to the community in other contexts. Within the UAE, there's a heterogenic nature to the community. It is the home of over 200 nationalities. And because of that, the sense of community is critical to the museum narrative. We tell the story from multiple different perspectives. We tell the story of the country in a way which has great resonance for people who call the UAE home, but we also tell the story in a way in which, for example, a visitor from India or a visitor from China will see an object where they see the connection to the UAE's history and the UAE's story and the UAE's culture. And in that sense, what the museum does, it increases the concept of community from local to global. And that is a key element of the storytelling within the museum. And so when we are open, we that will continue. If there's one more thing I might say, and I cannot help but say this because Manuel, my friend and colleague, is here next to me, which is that all of the museums on Saadiyat are also the definition of a community. This is a community of institutions, from the first one that opens to Zayed National Museum, which will open soon, to the Natural History Museum, to Team Lab, which has just opened last month, to the Guggenheim. That sense of institutional community is key to the individual success of any of the museums within that community.
Amazing. Actually, it's the wider vision of Saadiyat Cultural District, as you just said. So part of connecting with community is by making Louvre Abu Dhabi accessible, you just mentioned, to hard-to-reach communities, perhaps. What would you say are the key steps you have taken to make museum experience more accessible to the wide range of visitors? I know you might already mention some points. Is there anything else that you would like to share?
So when you're thinking about accessibility and access to the museum, you can really break down into a series of touch points and entry points, and this is how you can build for each strategy in order to mitigate or waive this hindrance. I mentioned the people of determination and the physical barrier. So physical barrier is something that has to be integrated into the design. And the beauty, I completely agree with what Peter said on this community of museums. It is not possible in the 21st century in Abu Dhabi with this inclusive vision that our museums are not absolutely accessible. So they can have incredible architecture, they can, but I can assure you that all of them are accessible physically, which is not the case with all the museums in the world. So this is something which is obvious for us, but in our colleagues all over the world, from Africa to Europe or Asia, they are struggling with challenging buildings to welcome everyone, and that can be a pain. For us, it's a given. The mental challenges are the most difficult to tackle for an institution because they require human mediation, human presence, human interpretation. So it means people who are trained, people who have this flame also to welcome. And we share. Actually, we have some from our team who join ZNM who are fantastic, and this is also this community of people who believe in the transmission, and we're very proud. They do it at ZNM or LAD. It doesn't matter. This is the desire to reach out to people. I think there are also, so I spoke about the symbolic, am I welcome or not, which is another way. And there is the economic approach as well, in which the price of the ticket, is it a barrier or not? Is it important? I don't think for a tourist coming from abroad, 65 dirham is an issue given all the other costs and so on. For someone living in the UAE, you have all range of social background, so it can be complex for some. It can be difficult if you want. So you need to be able to club. You need to have a way of coming loyalty program. If you come often, how can you optimize your approach? And you have people who for which it's an amount which is so in this case we need to find a way to open the gate when it's possible and to do the extra meter. We had a beautiful community approach with the taxi driver, for instance. It's one of many, but
yes,
you remember,
I remember.
This was beautiful. We said it was actually doing two strategies at the same time. We're saying to the driver coming with your license and with your uniform, on a given day, you can come for free with 3 people at a special so people were not only free to come, but they had the pride of coming with people and to be the one to open the access to the museum. And on top of that, we were transforming taxi driver into an ambassador for the museum and giving a pride to people who were doing that job. And for me, it's like, you tick all the boxes and actually you create this social fabric that is very important. And there is nobody should be left.
Wonderful. So, Dr. Peter, how was accessibility integrated in the design process of the gallery space in Zayed Hashim Museum?
That's a great question, and I will get to. I will answer it. I mean,
sure.
Briefly, I could say that all of the gallery spaces are designed with accessibility, but accessibility which is not just based upon physical accessibility. So, for example, neurodivergent accessibility is part of what we focus for, and every aspect of the definition of the person of determination is incorporated into the accessibility policy. And there's a few things I'd like to say about that. The first is that we are lucky, as Manuel alluded to, because With a new build, it's possible. With an older museum established in the 19th century or 20th century in Europe, these are difficult issues and expensive issues to negotiate through. But because we have top architects, Jean Nouvel in the case of the Louvre Abu Dhabi and Norman Foster in the case of Zayed National Museum and their teams, from the outset, there's no issue of retrofitting. We can plan and have this as part of our architecture. That's the first thing to say. The second thing is that even though I've said to the accessibility people that work in Zayed National Museum, I have zero interest. I have zero interest in another benchmark. Zayed National Museum has to be the benchmark. And so often I feel that we look elsewhere for benchmarks when we have the resources and the institutional ability to be the benchmark. And
wow.
I think that is something which is absolutely critical to what we're trying to achieve. And that is part of the vision of Sheikh Zayed to create an inclusive, accessible society. And that's something which is embedded in the museum. The last thing I would say is that we are very lucky to be the second museum on Saadiyat, because we have learnt so much from Manuel and his team. We work very closely with them. I've been in this position for 6 years. The first person that I sat with was Manuel, and talked to him about the challenges that they faced and how they were overcome. And so we have been able to learn from their experiences and benefit from being...
Yeah.
You always want to be the first, and they were. But being the second is okay, because being the second means that you can be the first in a different way. Perhaps.
No, if I can. No,
It's an advantage, of
we're
course.
good friends. We're teasing each other all the time. But so of course it was a joke. We're waiting for. But if you just need to be in front of the magnificent Zayed National Museum building to understand it's happening. The date will be given, it will be a blessing, it will be a gift, but we see it coming. So we say, again, I totally agree on the fact that we are building our own benchmark.
Yeah.
What we're doing here is our benchmark. It goes for the definition of the museum that will be impacted after when the Saadiyat Cultural District is if never finished, but at least delivered in its intention, and we're changing that. And from each of us, we can learn also from our successes and glory and so on, but also from our mistakes. A museum is an institution which is alive. We adapt. We try, it works, it doesn't work, on exit here or something. We have a practice, we can test, and we can share also what works or what doesn't work. We can we're trying that. What are the timing? What should be the timing of opening? Late at night, early in the morning? When is? We learn on the more museum, the more we will have data to improve and to do something which is not an abstraction, something which is relevant to Abu Dhabi and to the UAE and to the region. So the group is also the power.
And I think that might, if I may, come back to the issue of the community of museums. So, when we are planning our opening hours or the gallery visitation, the density of gallery visitation, the visitor flow, there are very few instances in the world where a new museum can ask the director of a museum which is about 800 meters away, dealing with the same community, what is their data? And then we were able to utilize that data to frame what we are trying to achieve. And I think that collective approach to knowledge and knowledge sharing is extraordinary.
I agree. I think that's a great advantage, and I love this collaboration between the two museums, inshallah, for the all museums in the beautiful Saadiyat Cultural District. So the book fair's main theme is knowledge eliminates our community. I'm curious, Manuel, what evolved since the opening of Louvre Abu Dhabi since 2017 in terms of connection with students, whether schools or universities? I read about the students taking over the museum initiative. Would you please tell us more about that?
I may have unveiled it slightly. So we do call for tenders to the universities and schools, so they need to have the desire to do it. We're not imposing that on them, and then we let them come with proposition of what they would like to do if we were giving them the keys of the museum for a day. So it can be in the galleries, it can be in front of the artworks, it can be outside, it can be anything. It can be, the last one was with the GEMS school, and we had like, Rim, you remember, 2,000 people, 2,000 schools, so they were doing music, they were doing interpretation, theater, all type of creative activities.
Wonderful.
Inspired by the museum, or inspired by the artwork, or inspired by the place. You know, because we are this beautiful museum built on the sea, and it's a inspirational place.
Wonderful.
But just on the book fair itself, do you have a question on the book fair booth or not? Because on this one we decided, and I think this is something we shared with ZNM also, to interact with our friends from Arabic Language Center, which are also a fantastic partner for the book fair, but throughout all the years, and we're doing plenty of activities, and some that you don't heard about because they're touching a specific community, and some which are extremely visible. Each time we're trying to reinvent a little bit a proposition for the book fair. So this last year it was Kalila Wadimna, which was our exhibition, and this time we try to go beyond knowledge, more on a sensorial approach, because we believe there are many ways to discover the museum, and we are about to launch sensorial olfactive visit in the museum.
Wow.
So you will have smells which have been made by a great nose working for Givaudan, this partnership. And we're launching a book that goes with it, in which you have the artworks on the smell. So it's like a curated smell inspired by the collection. So it's not knowledge. It's a different approach to the museum. It's a sensorial. It's connected to the communities, and to there are many ways to enjoy a museum.
Wonderful. So that's for a perspective of already an open museum. But from a pre-opening perspective, how are you involving students, teachers, and designing the public programs for the museum when it opens?
Thank you. So, when we started this project, and there are people in the audience who started the project long before I was involved in it, and so they're aware of the institutional history. But it was always envisaged that ZNM was an institution before it was an open building. So it exists as an institution. We are engaged with the community, we are engaged with school groups, and I think this is a very powerful way to think about, or even to come back to the issue of ICOM and the definition of a museum. It's partly about redefining something away from things to people. So for ZNM, we've been very much engaged with school groups. One of the first things we did was establish what's called the Teacher Advisory Group, where we got teachers from a whole range of schools, and we asked them how they were engaged in teaching UAE history and culture and the values and achievements of the founding father, Sheikh Zayed. And we took what they were teaching and we took our approach, and we tried to, and we weren't saying necessarily that one was right or wrong or more correct or less correct. But it was an exercise of being responsive to each other. We took the learnings away from that, and we also made sure that the way in which our narrative was being directed was friendly to school children. So, and I think this comes back to being, in this incredibly well-supported environment, we actually built a small mock-up of one of the galleries. And several weeks before, we asked students, we did a survey of school students about what they knew about certain aspects of what would be in the museum narrative. 4 weeks before, then we took them through the gallery using VR and actual objects, actual setups. 1 hour later, we asked them what they remembered. 1 week later, we asked them what they remembered, and then several weeks later, we asked what had really sunk in. And we used that data to slightly alter the narrative and the way it is presented. And the data was fascinating. As a test bed for understanding how museums are received across a diverse group of people, the responses were fascinating. And they allowed us to tweak the narrative to make sure that it was accessible and impactful, but impactful over the long term, which is the pivotal role that a national museum like ZNM must play.
This is brilliant, Dr. Peter. You reminded me of Louvre Bouظabi Ambassadors Program, and building this wider range of volunteers and engaging the students and engaging different students, like for example an engineer to talk about the museums and their communities, etc. Yeah. This is brilliant. So we just talk about the now. Let's talk about the immediate future. Dr. Peter, Zayed Nasser Museum, all eyes on the Saadiyat Cultural District is opening soon, inshallah. And Manuel, you have been running Louvre Bouظabi successfully for over almost the past 8 years. So looking ahead, how do you see the role of museums evolving in the UAE as community anchors and knowledge platforms? And this question is open for both of you.
I mean, I'm happy to go. Yeah.
No, maybe start, yeah.
Sure. Okay. It's very polite. Thank you. So I think the generation of knowledge is critical, right? So one of the things that we started 3 years ago was the Zayed National Museum Research Grant Scheme, launched in 2022. We have applications from across the world, and the research agenda is set by the narrative of the museum. And we have a particular focus on, well-established researchers. We had 7 times as many applications as possible grants to receive, so it was extremely competitive. But what we were able to do there was choose successful applications from highly qualified scholars, both from within the UAE and at a broader level. But what we also kept an eye on during that process was encouraging capacity building as a research exercise, or capacity building as a researcher within the UAE. So we had a category sometimes called avocational researching, which is basically, you might not have a PhD, you might not be a professor, you might not be a university lecturer, but you can still conduct research. And it might be research about your family. It might be research about stories that your grandparents told you. That is research. That is community knowledge. That is community building. And so that activity will continue, but of critical significance is that the knowledge which is generated from that research grant is then built into the museum. It's reflected back into what we do at Zayed National Museum. I think that mechanism, that feedback mechanism of constant research, knowledge production, incorporation, and then communication, that will drive the museum forward into a very healthy future, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Because of our ancient, now almost a decade history, I will dezoom. I will say, I think in terms of knowledge production, there will be a before and after when we have completed the picture of the Saadiyat Cultural District. Because even if I'm teasing my friend Peter on the opening date of ZNM, it's coming. Team Lab, Natural History Museum, you just need to drive around and you see. Guggenheim will be the last one in the sequence, but it's also not very far. So there will be one moment where you will have a story of the world rooted in this territory, a story of the nation talking to the world and talking to the identity, a story of life and science, a story of curiosity, a story of Global South connected, and all of this together. So this is going to create source of production of knowledge. We have collection, we have objects, we have specimens, depending on which museums. So this is going to be a power source of knowledge creation by the motto of the museums. Of course, the UAE identity, the long history in the ZNM, in our case, the connected history, and we have some elements on the materiality. We're building a lab. We also have a program of stakeholder. Sorry, no, how do you say bourse? When you are incentivizing the people you have selected, it's I forgot the yeah of application grant is. So we have same idea of finding the best scholars to work on your collection, on your narrative. So all of this will be the production of knowledge. It also goes with books. We're in a book fair. We believe in books. We believe in dissemination
of course.
By the production of content in a way that it is ingestible and digestible, which is in the even if it's now evolving with the dematerialization, the book is one of the main support of dissemination. So
definitely.
when you will have all the 5 museums open on the production of knowledge through very academic approach, through also all these books on all this attempt to explain this story, you imagine the resonance that will be coming from Abu Dhabi, from Sadia.
Inshallah, I can't wait. Thank you so much, Manuel and Dr. Peter, for your insights.
You're very welcome.
It's clear that both the Zayed National Museum and Louvre Abu Dhabi are not only preserving and sharing heritage, but also building bridges with communities in meaningful ways. So today's session reminds us that museums are not just places of the past. They are living, evolving places that belong to everyone. Thank you to our panelists again, and to all of you for being part of our conversation today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.